In the heart of a bustling city, where time rushed like a roaring river and souls chased dreams with weary eyes, lived a man named Idris. To the world, he was an ordinary man, thin-framed, with a humble beard, dressed in faded clothes stitched with patience. He sold second-hand books on a cracked wooden cart by the roadside, beneath a neem tree whose shade had seen generations pass. But Idris carried something far more valuable than gold, unshakable faith in Allah. Allah par Yaqeen Rakho to Dekho, he would often whisper to himself, as dust settled on his books and customers passed him by like wind through silence. One chilly morning, the city awoke to news of a large business closing its doors, throwing hundreds jobless. Chaos danced through streets. Banks grew colder, and eyes searched for stability in empty wallets. But Idris, with a cup of warm chai and a prayer on his lips, opened his cart as usual. An old friend, Salman, once a high-ranking executive now out of work, stopped by with disbelief in his eyes. "Idris, the world is falling apart. Don't you see? People like us, small, invisible, what hope do we have?" Idris smiled, pouring chai into a cracked cup, handing it to Salman. "Our rizq was never in the hands of people, Salman Bhai. Allah is Al-Razak. He provides even to the ant beneath a stone." Salman chuckled bitterly. "Faith doesn't pay rent." Idris only looked upward. "But it opens doors where logic sees only walls." Later that day, the sky shifted. Clouds gathered without warning. Rain fell like it had a purpose. Idris quickly covered his books with plastic sheets and prepared to leave. As he pulled the cart under the shelter of a closed shop, a black car stopped beside him. A young woman stepped out, her face hidden behind sunglasses, her demeanor hurried. "Do you sell old poetry books? Anything rare? My grandfather's collection was lost in the flood." Idris nodded, quietly pulling out a dusty green volume, its spine barely holding. "This one," he said, "is a copy of Bali Jibril by Iqbal. Printed in 1940. Found it in a junk pile last year." The woman froze. She took off her glasses, eyes softening. This was my grandfather's favorite. I've searched for this everywhere." She offered him a bundle of notes. Idris looked down, shook his head gently. "It's yours. I'm only a wasila. Allah brought it to you." She stared, stunned. "Why would you give something this valuable away?" "Because it was never mine to keep. And because I believe that what leaves in Allah's way returns multiplied." That night, Idris returned home soaked but smiling. His small room smelled of rain and hope. He prayed, his hands trembling with gratitude, heart light as a feather in the wind. The next morning, as he was setting up his cart, two men in suits approached him. One held a briefcase, the other a card. "We're from the Al-Murad Foundation," the man said. "Our benefactor wishes to fund a mobile library in underprivileged areas. She recommended you." Idris blinked. "Me? Yes. She says your honesty and trust in Allah moved her deeply." The man opened the briefcase. Inside was a neat stack of forms, proposals, and a check, one Idris couldn't have imagined even in his most daring dreams. He fell silent. Tears pooled at the corners of his eyes. In his heart, he repeated the words that had guided him through every storm. Allah Par Twaqqal Rakho Bas. And as he signed the first document, his hands steady, the world outside seemed to pause. For even the universe listens when faith speaks with sincerity. The days that followed were nothing short of miraculous. The mobile library became a symbol of learning, hope, and divine mercy. Children who once played barefoot in alleys now flipped through pages of Fouris and Kaleb. Elderly men sat under trees reciting couplets they hadn't heard in decades. And still, Idris kept his cart. Not for profit, but as a reminder. One evening, a little boy with sunburnt cheeks approached him shyly. "Uncle, do you believe Allah really listens?" Idris knelt, placing a hand on the boy's head. "More than you know, beta. He listens even when we don't speak. He sees even what we hide. And when we trust him, truly trust him, he gives us what no one else can." The boy looked down, then whispered, "My mother's sick. We don't have money for medicine." Idris closed the cart early. He didn't think twice. He walked the boy home, met his mother, and handed her enough to cover more than just medicine. That night, he found himself with no money for dinner. His pockets empty, the street silent. But in his heart, peace reigned. He walked home slowly, smiling at the stars. And just before he reached his door, a stranger tapped his shoulder. "Are you the man with the books?" the man asked. "Yes," Idris replied. "My brother said you helped his son today. Please accept this, it's just a small thank you." He handed Idris a small envelope and disappeared before he could refuse. Inside, triple what he had given away. Idris looked up at the night sky, his voice a whisper carried on the breeze. "Allah per Yaqeen Rakho to Dekho. Shall I continue?" The breeze danced softly through the narrow lanes as Idris stepped inside his modest home, the envelope still warm in his hand. He placed it gently on the table, as though it carried more than money. Perhaps the scent of Allah's mercy, perhaps a lesson in invisible blessings. The light flickered once above him, and then steadied, like the soul of a man who had weathered doubt and chosen trust. He didn't count the notes. Not because he wasn't curious, but because he didn't need to. Allah had already calculated what was due. Idris simply turned on the kettle, filled his cup with chai, and sat by the small window that framed a slice of the night sky. The stars blinked like knowing witnesses. Sleep came gently to him, but before it did, he remembered his late mother's voice, soft and sure. "Beta, when you walk with Allah, you may not know the destination, but every step will be blessed." The next morning, a quiet knock on the door woke him. When he opened it, there stood a girl in her school uniform, holding a plastic bag. "Baba said to give you this," she said, smiling. "You gave him books to study when he had nothing." Inside the bag were warm parathas, a small tub of achar, and a card with crayons scrawled across it. *Shukriya, Uncle Idris. His throat tightened. What strange currency is kindness, he thought, that it comes back in flavors, in laughter, in children's scribbles. By midday, as he returned to his cart, the sun bore down unforgivingly. But the shade of the old neem tree still stood faithful, and so did his books, stacked neatly, quietly waiting for hands and hearts. Today, however, something had changed. Word had spread. People no longer passed his cart with indifferent glances. They stopped. They browsed. They bought. But more than that, they talked. An elderly man came looking for shikwa and stayed to talk about lost love and prayers once whispered at far. A teenager asked for a book on the Prophet's life and sat under the tree reading it like a thirsty traveler who'd found water in the desert. And every time Idris handed over a book, he said, "Don't thank me. Thank Allah. He wrote your story before this day was born." Later in the afternoon, a man in a wheelchair approached. Idris recognized him from years ago, a man who had once walked with arrogance, his business booming, his voice full of thunder. Time had humbled him, but not broken him. "I lost everything," he said, voice graveled with sorrow. "People who called me brother don't even return my salam now." Idris knelt beside him, met his eyes. "Then you're blessed," he said softly. "Because now you've lost the noise and found the silence where Allah speaks." The man didn't reply immediately. Then he nodded, slowly, a tear tracing a silent path down his cheek. "Do you think he still listens to me?" he asked. Idris touched his heart. He never stopped. "We just stopped speaking with honesty." As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of amber and fire, Idris began packing up. That's when he noticed a woman sitting quietly nearby, a scarf pulled tightly around her head. She looked anxious, as though waiting for courage to arrive. "Are you looking for a book?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "I don't know. I just felt drawn here." He nodded, not surprised. Sometimes Allah pulls us toward something before we even know why. She looked at the books, her eyes landing on a thin, worn copy of Surah Maryam with commentary. She picked it up gently, like it might break. I'm pregnant, she whispered. And alone. I came here to end it today. But something stopped me. Idris didn't flinch. He had seen brokenness before, worn it in seasons of his own. Maybe what stopped you wasn't something, he said. Maybe it was someone. She clutched the book tightly, her eyes brimming. I used to pray, she said. I don't know why I stopped. He smiled. That doesn't matter. What matters is that he never stopped listening. They sat in silence as the call to Maghrib echoed softly through the streets. The woman looked up, eyes reflecting a distant light. I think I'll keep the baby, she said quietly. Idris only nodded, his heart swelling with something deeper than joy. Another soul had been redirected by the map only faith could read. As he walked home that evening, cart empty of books but full of moments, he passed by a masjid where young boys recited Quran in unison. The rhythm of their voices washed over him like rain on dry earth. He sat on the steps for a while, listening, remembering, absorbing. A little boy ran out of the masjid, holding a Quran close to his chest. Uncle, the boy called, recognizing him. Will you teach me Urdu poetry? Idris laughed, full and free. Only if you teach me Tajweed. The boy grinned. Deal made. And just like that, faith passed quietly from one heart to another, not with thunder or miracles, but with sincerity and softness, whispers carried on the wind of trust. And still, Idris walked, one step after the other, never quite knowing where the road would lead. But always certain, that as long as he placed his trust in the one above, the journey itself would be the reward. The road beneath Idris's feet was uneven, but his stride was steady, guided not by the certainty of destination but by the quiet assurance in his heart. Trust was no longer just a word to him, it was the rhythm of his breath, the anchor of his days. With every small act of faith, the world seemed to unfold around him in ways both subtle and profound. That night, he sat under the same neem tree long after closing time. The sky above was alive with stars, whispering secrets to those who knew how to listen. Across the street, the hum of life slowed, shutters rolled down, footsteps faded. But in Idris's corner of the world, something sacred lingered, like the echo of a dua still circling the heavens, waiting to be answered. A man in worn clothes, his face marked with fatigue, came and sat beside him. You don't know the man said without preamble. But I know you. My son was one of the boys from the library van. He used to skip school, steal change from my pockets. Now he sits with a book till midnight. Idris looked at him, eyes gentle. All children need is a reason to believe they matter, he said. Books remind them of that. The man nodded, swallowing hard. I came to say thank you. I haven't said those words in years. Idris placed a hand on his shoulder. Say them to Allah. I'm just part of his plan. The man stayed a little longer, as if resting in the presence of something greater than comfort, perhaps grace. Then he left, and Idris remained under the tree, listening to the quiet throb of the universe. The next morning, Idris was awoken not by the call of birds but by the excited knock of 3 young boys. Uncle, a film crew is here. They're asking for you. Still half asleep, he followed them, barefoot, until he saw a group of people with cameras and microphones gathered near his cart. A woman with a clipboard approached. Idris Sahib, she asked, her tone surprised and respectful. We're from Insaniat, a documentary series. Someone nominated you. We'd love to tell your story. He blinked, caught between amusement and humility. I don't have a story, he said simply. I just sell books and trust Allah. The crew chuckled lightly, charmed by his sincerity. The woman pressed gently. People need stories like yours. Especially now. The world is heavy with doubt. Idris looked around, the growing crowd, the children peeking from windows, the old neem tree standing tall. Then he nodded. Only if you film the children. And the library van. This isn't about me. It's about what Allah did through me. As the crew set up, he watched from the sidelines. The boys who once loitered with slingshots now spoke about Iqbal's dreams. Girls who had never held books now recited lines of poetry with the confidence of scholars. And in every corner was the echo of change born not from wealth or fame, but from faith. Later that day, while they packed up, the director turned to Idris. "You know," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I didn't believe in anything before today. I saw kindness, but not conviction. Until now." Idris smiled. Belief isn't about seeing the whole path. It's about taking the next step, even in the dark. The man was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "I think I'll pray tonight." For the first time in years. Idris didn't respond. He only looked upward, eyes shining, not with pride but with awe. As the weeks passed, the documentary aired. And to Idris's quiet astonishment, his cart became more than a roadside stop, it became a symbol. People from distant cities wrote letters, sent books to be added to the mobile library, offered donations without names. But Idris accepted only what was needed. He gave the rest away. One afternoon, a boy no older than 10 approached him with a folded note. "My father asked me to give you this." Idris opened it slowly. The paper was stained with ink and hope. "I was about to end my life the day I heard your story. Then I remembered what you said, that Allah never stops listening. I called out to him. And somehow, he sent me peace. Thank you. May your footsteps always walk in light." Idris closed his eyes, holding the note like a fragile flower. He remembered how, years ago, he had stood at a similar crossroads, lonely, broken, unseen. He had no wealth, no connections, no plan. Only a whispered dua beneath the same neem tree, asking Allah not for riches, but for purpose. And now here he was. Not a scholar, not a preacher, not even a man with influence. Just a bookseller who believed. Who kept believing, even when there was no evidence, only trust. One evening, while visiting a nearby madrasa, Idris was asked to speak to the children. He stood before them, heart thudding, unsure of what to say. He took a deep breath and spoke. "When I was your age, I thought success was becoming someone important. But I learned that true success is to be useful to others, in Allah's name. Never underestimate what Allah can do through you, even if you have nothing but good intentions and a pure heart. Allah is not limited by our circumstances. He is only limited by our doubts." Silence followed. Then one child raised his hand. "Uncle, how do we know if we really trust Allah?" Idris paused, then said, "When you stop asking how, and start saying Alhamdulillah, no matter what." The children nodded, their eyes glowing, not with full understanding perhaps, but with the spark of something just beginning. And as Idris walked home beneath a sky full of stars, that spark followed him, lighting every street, every soul, every shadow. The moon followed him like a silent guardian, casting silver patterns across the uneven path. The city was quiet now, the kind of stillness that only came after a day filled with stories, voices, and prayers. Idris walked slowly, the echo of children's questions still lingering in his ears, their innocent hunger for truth becoming his nightly companion. He did not need applause, nor recognition. What nourished him was seeing hearts awaken to Allah, slowly, one after another, like candles lighting in a room once dark. At his doorstep, a folded cloth bundle lay neatly on the ground. He picked it up, puzzled. Inside was a fresh white kurta, a handwritten note, and a small pouch of dates. "May Allah clothe you in barakah as you've clothed others in faith. Someone remembered how you once gave your only shawl away. Consider this a return." Idris stood still, touched more deeply than words could hold. He didn't know who had left the gift. He didn't need to. Allah knew. And in the quiet transaction between giving and receiving, between unseen sacrifices and unexpected returns, Idris saw the signs he had long learned to recognize. Not miracles with lightning, but mercy stitched into the small, the ordinary, the overlooked. That night, he wore the white kurta for Isha prayer. As he bowed, forehead to prayer mat, he felt as if the ground beneath him had disappeared. There was only surrender, only the nearness of the one who had never left him. When he sat in the final tashahhud, he took a moment longer than usual, whispering du'as for every face, every child, every broken heart he had met. A few days later, he received a letter in the post, unusual in itself. It came from a remote village in Balochistan. The handwriting was shaky, the paper creased many times. By Idris. Your books reached our small madrasa. The children had never seen so many colors, so many names they'd never heard. We don't have electricity for long, but we now have stories. We read by oil lamp. I teach what little I know, but your gift has brought more knowledge here than I ever could. May Allah reward you for planting what we will water, inshallah. Idris folded the letter and placed it in a wooden box under his bed where he kept all such messages, not as trophies, but as reminders. These were his treasures. Not bank slips, not certificates, but the quiet echoes of lives touched by his unseen sacrifices. In the world's eyes, he was still a roadside bookseller. But in the eyes of the one who counted, he was a servant in the right place, doing the right thing. One morning, just before Far, Idris had a dream. He was walking through a desert, endless and quiet, with nothing but the Quran in his hands. The pages fluttered in a breeze that came from nowhere. He was tired, thirsty, yet he walked on. Then, on the horizon, he saw people gathering, young and old, some laughing, others crying, all carrying their own books. They walked toward him. One by one, they handed him their books and said, "You reminded us to read again." He woke up with his pillow damp and his heart shaken. He didn't speak of the dream to anyone. Some dreams are not meant to be shared. They are gifts, private signs between a soul and its Lord. As the mobile library project expanded, so did the faces that entered Idris's life. There was a girl named Noor who would sit for hours in the van, reading hadith and science books with equal devotion. Her father had once forbidden education for girls. But after hearing Idris speak at a local masjid, he changed his mind. If education brings this kind of light, he had said, then how can I block the sun? Then there was Ralph, a teenager with a criminal record, hardened by poverty, whose only companion had been anger. He had stumbled upon the library van one evening, and picked up a book on the lives of the Sahaba. Something softened. He returned the next day. And again. Weeks passed. He began helping unload the books. One day he brought Idris a cold bottle of water. I used to steal from carts like yours, he confessed. And now? Idris asked. Now I guard them. There was no dramatic transformation, no heavenly trumpet. Just small choices, shifting sand grains of the soul. But Idris knew, these were the unseen victories that angels recorded, and Allah multiplied. One evening, a woman wearing an old chador approached the cart, clutching a tattered notebook. I heard you help publish stories, she said shyly. Idris raised an eyebrow. Only if the story has heart. She handed him the notebook. It was filled with poems, raw, beautiful, trembling with pain and hope. She had written them over 20 years, never once sharing them. Then it's time, Idris said softly. The world needs voices like yours. He took the notebook and promised to return with printed copies. True to his word, he partnered with a small local press and helped publish her book. It sold modestly, but enough to bring her dignity, and the realization that her words mattered. Weeks later, she returned with her son. He now believes his mother is someone important, she said, eyes shining. Because of you. No, Idris corrected gently. Because of Allah, who never lets a voice go unheard when it speaks truth. The cycle continued. People came. People healed. Books changed hands. Hearts grew lighter. And through it all, Idris remained who he had always been. A servant with no title, no uniform, just faith worn deep into his soul like old calligraphy etched into stone. The years passed like turning pages, one story bleeding into the next, but the spirit of Idris remained untouched by time. His beard grayed, his steps slowed, but his eyes, those eyes still shimmered with the same light that had once guided a lonely man with an empty cart and a heart full of faith. The neem tree under which he had started remained his quiet companion, Its roots deepened just as his legacy had. One early morning, long before the streets awakened and the azan for far kissed the silence, Idris sat under the tree with a small bundle in his lap. Inside it were two things: a Quran bound in green leather, and a letter he had written the night before, its ink still fresh. He looked to the sky, stars slowly fading into the pale blush of dawn, and whispered, "Ya Allah, you have written for me a life I never imagined. I asked for sustenance, you gave me purpose. I asked for a place to sleep, you gave me hearts to awaken. I had nothing but you, and you were enough." He didn't go home that day. When the shopkeepers opened their shutters, when children rushed to the library van, when the tea stalls fired up their stoves, they noticed his cart was untouched, his chair empty. The city didn't grieve immediately, because legends don't vanish in noise. They slip away quietly, like a prayer whispered under breath, felt more than heard. It was Ralph, the same boy who once stole to survive, who found the letter. It was addressed simply, "To whoever chooses to carry the flame." Ralph read it aloud, voice trembling. "This was never about me. I was only a bridge. If you are reading this, then know, Allah's work doesn't stop when one servant finishes his task. It continues through every hand willing to carry it. The cart, the books, the children, none of this was mine. It was his. Always was. Always will be. Keep teaching. Keep healing. Keep believing, even when the night feels endless. The dawn always comes." The letter was passed from hand to hand, until the entire street, the whole neighborhood, stood still in reverence. Shopkeepers closed their stalls for a moment of silence. Children sat quietly, holding books to their chests like relics. A man climbed the mosque's minaret not to call the azan, but to recite Surah Rahman in Idris's honor, his voice rippling through the morning air like silk. People came from across the city to stand by the neem tree. Flowers were laid, but no one cried too loudly. Because Idris hadn't died. No, not truly. His story had simply changed form, spilled from a single life into 1,000 others. Like rain that once touched the desert, and left behind blooming gardens. The cart remained where it always had been, now painted and polished by the very youth Idris had once taught. But it bore a new sign now, carved into the wood with care. "Trust Allah, then take the first step." A year passed. Then, another. The mobile libraries grew. A foundation was formed in his name, not for fame, but function. Girls who once sat shyly at the edge of the gatherings were now leading them. Boys who once feared failure were now teachers, poets, and guardians of dreams. Noor, now a young woman, gave lectures in colleges on the power of trust, always beginning her speech the same way. "I once held a book that changed my life. But it wasn't the book alone, it was the man who placed it in my hands and said, 'Don't thank me. Thank Allah.'" Ralph became the director of the foundation. He never let anyone call him Sir. Only Ralph Bai. He wore Idris's old shawl like an inheritance and often repeated, "If Allah can change me, he can change anyone." Idris's story traveled further than he ever did. It was translated into languages he never spoke, printed in books he never read, and broadcast to people he never met. But no matter how far it reached, its core remained the same, unchanged, unshaken. It was not the story of a scholar, or a warrior, or a man of wealth. It was the story of a man who had nothing but tawakkul, trust in Allah, and who used that trust as his light in every darkness. Even today, when someone stands at a crossroads of despair and whispers, "What now?" A friend, a teacher, a stranger might reply, "Take the first step. Allah is already waiting on the second." And when people ask how one man with a cart could move so many hearts, those who remember Idris smile and say, "Because he didn't move them. Allah did. Idris just showed us where to look." And so, the story lives on, not written in stone, but etched into souls. Every time someone picks up a book with trembling fingers. Every time a lost heart dares to believe again. Every time a prayer rises from the lips of someone broken and is carried by faith alone. Idris is there. Not in body, but in barakah. not in voice, but in echo, not in fame, but in footsteps that walk the road he once walked, trusting Allah, step by step, all the way home.